Spiral from the Book of Saw is the ninth film in the franchise. It's the second attempt to essentially do a reboot after the previous film, Jigsaw. Summarizing this movie, it's about a new killer who is targeting cops. He focuses on them due to corruption in the police system. Chris Rock's character Zeke spends virtually the entire film investigating the murders. I like a number of the Saw films, I can defend them. I always saw them as something more than just mere torture porn. The critics were always unfair to this franchise, they didn't seem to really understand it. Most of the films are pretty philosophical and touched on a number of themes such as revenge, justice, rage, and obsession. Saw 2 through 6 particularly tackled some hot-button issues like the death penalty, health insurance companies, abortion, prostitution, police brutality, among other issues. Despite the gore, the films had heart. However, Saw 3D and Jigsaw were a disappointment. I had hoped Spiral would turn things around, but I just found it to be by the numbers. Just run-of-the-mill. It felt like a rehash of the worst aspects of the previous Saw films. Here are some specific problems from the film though. The ending was super obvious. As soon as they skipped the detective's death in the tape recording, audiences knew he was the killer. This was the ending that didn't have that punch in the gut like the previous films. Fans of the Saw franchise got zero closure for Hoffman, Logan, Gordon, among other characters. Many viewers would have been happy with just one offhand comment about their fate, but we got nothing. It's hardly even connected to the Saw universe. Also, none of the characters were likable or interesting. In the previous Saw films, Hoffman and Amanda were villains, but they were engaging and complex. In Spiral, the villain doesn't have any depth, and he's not intimidating or charismatic. Additionally, none of the cops or detectives had me invested in the way that I felt for the previous detectives in Saw 1 through 6, like Carey, Rigg, Matthews, and Schramm. These new characters in Spiral were boring and one-dimensional. You couldn't make a distinction among any of the cops who died. The message of the film was a rehash from the previous films regarding a corrupt police system, and to name a couple of examples, Spiral was never thought challenging as the test we saw Jeff go through in Saw 3, or Rigg go through in Saw 4, or William in Saw 6. There were so many moral debates about the decisions they made in those films, but in Spiral there's no nuance. There was no mystery and tension. The detectives seemed to just be going through the motions. There wasn't really any investigating, they just received boxes and recordings telling them where to go, and they'd show up to the spot and find a dead body. Go back to the office, then this would repeat again. They were merely reacting to everything. At no point did you ever feel like they were getting closer to catching the killer like some of the previous Saw films. Jokes also didn't land and the tone wasn't right. Chris Rock confirmed my theory that he's just not a good dramatic actor. He's goofy and he does a poor job at portraying the right human expressions on screen. The voice is awful, and the monologues we hear in the tapes were plain. Jigsaw sounded like a psychotic wise man. He would grab your attention every time he spoke. This new voice sounded too impersonal, nothing human about it. You feel detached from it. And I've seen many defenders of the film agree with a number of points I've laid out here. However, they try to argue that although it's flawed, at least it's better than the previous film, Jigsaw. But just because this film is slightly better than Jigsaw doesn't mean we should be satisfied with it. I don't think viewers should settle for mediocrity. It appears the franchise has just spent more time on the traps and gore since they've forgotten how to write compelling characters.